The dining room gleamed under crystalline chandeliers that adjusted their luminescence based on the room's ambient mood, currently set to celebration, which meant warm golden light that made everyone look successful and healthy. Maya watched the light shift subtly as people took their seats, the smart system reading stress levels and compensating with soothing wavelengths. It didn't help, the table stretched before them like a runway, each place setting equipped with a holographic display module that would project presentations directly above the fine china. Crystal had already synced her phone 3 times, ensuring her Instagram metrics would display properly. Brandon's module flickered with financial charts he'd been rehearsing all week. Even the floral arrangements were engineered, bioluminescent orchids that pulsed gently, their glow intensifying when someone nearby spoke. As if the flowers themselves were interested in the conversation, Maya's module sat dark. She had nothing prepared, nothing to prove. Her phone buzzed in her clutch, Sienna sending a gif of someone flipping a table. Maya smiled despite herself. Richard Chen stood at the head of the table, his module already humming to life. The holographic display rose above his plate, a 3-dimensional rendering of the Chen property's empire, each building rotating slowly, green indicators showing profitability. Maya recognized the Williamsburg complex immediately. She'd spent 3 months analyzing its potential, another 2 convincing her father's team to pivot to green tech spaces without revealing her identity. The building spun in the projection, its profit margins climbing steadily upward in real-time data feeds. This year, Chen Properties expanded into 3 new markets, Richard began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd spent decades building an empire. Despite significant challenges in our legacy holdings, strategic pivots in several key properties increased our portfolio value by $47 million. He gestured, and the Williamsburg building enlarged, its transformation playing out in time-lapse, old office spaces converting to clean tech incubators. Solar panels unfurling across the roof like metallic flowers. I'd like to thank my consultant, Kay Chen, whose innovative strategies made this turnaround possible. James Morrison sat across from Maya, and she felt his gaze shift to her face. His expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes, curiosity, maybe recognition. Maya took a careful sip of wine, letting the Pinot Noir rest on her tongue for a moment before swallowing. Her hand stayed steady on the glass stem. Years of practice hiding in plain sight, applause rippled around the table, hands clapping in perfect rhythm. The holographic buildings dissolved into light particles that drifted down like digital snow. Vivian Chen rose next, her module displaying a carousel of gala photos, crystal ballrooms, designer gowns, checks presented to various charitable causes. This year, I chaired the Greenwich Botanical Society Gala, raising $1.2 million for green spaces. The photos cycled faster, each image carefully curated to show Vivian at the center, always radiant, always essential. I also joined the board of the Hartford Children's Museum and the Connecticut Arts Foundation. Our family's charitable footprint has never been more prominent, Maya knew the math. Her mother had spent approximately $800,000 on the galas themselves, venues, catering, her wardrobe. The event planners who made everything look effortless. The net charitable contribution was $400,000 spread across 3 organizations. Meanwhile, Maya's anonymous scholarship fund had distributed $2.8 million this year alone. But her mother's projection showed social media engagement rates, press mentions, society page features. The metrics that mattered to Vivian weren't about impact, they were about visibility. Brandon stood without waiting for applause to fade, his competitive instinct unable to let his mother hold attention for too long. His hologram exploded upward in a fountain of numbers, stock tickers, portfolio performance graphs, acquisition timelines. This year, I made partner at Sterling Heights Capital. His smile was sharp, predatory. My personal portfolio generated returns of 34%, outperforming the SP by 12 points. We also acquired Technova's venture arm, giving us access to emerging technology investments that will define the next decade. He looked directly at Maya, his hologram still spinning between them. Some of us are still climbing to new heights, while others have found their level and settled there quite comfortably. The comment landed with surgical precision. Several guests shifted uncomfortably. Maya felt heat creep up her neck but kept her face smooth, detached. She'd learned long ago that reaction was fuel for people like Brandon. Stillness was armor. James leaned back in his chair, his posture deceptively casual. But Maya noticed his jaw tighten, the way his fingers drummed once against the tablecloth before going still. He was cataloging everything, filing it away in whatever mental database journalists kept. Crystal stood, and her hologram was pure spectacle, a 360 view of her Instagram profile, follower count climbing in real time, engagement rates pulsing like a heartbeat. Images of her in designer clothes, at exclusive events, holding products with perfect influencer casualness. This year, I grew my platform to 520,000 followers across all channels. Her voice had that practiced authenticity that came from recording hundreds of stories. I launched partnerships with 12 luxury brands and became an ambassador for the Hartford Museum's Young Patrons Circle. My platform revenue increased 200% year over year. The hologram showed a pie chart of her income streams, affiliate commissions, sponsored posts, brand ambassadorships. Maya recognized several of the brands. 3 of them were portfolio companies in the Technova acquisition. Crystal had no idea she was essentially paying Maya a fraction of a cent every time she posted about their products. Aunt Linda didn't stand, she simply activated her module from her seat, a power move that said she didn't need to perform like the younger generation. Her display was elegant. Understated, a simple list of board positions, philanthropic contributions, her son Derek's achievements listed as extensions of her own success. It's wonderful that Crystal has found such success despite her humble origins, Linda said, her voice carrying across the table with devastating clarity. She's proof that marrying well can absolutely transform your circumstances. Crystal's smile froze mid-what. Her hologram flickered slightly, as if her emotional state was interfering with the projection. Brandon reached over and squeezed her hand, a gesture that looked supportive but felt dismissive, like he was patting a child who'd skinned their knee. Derek stood, his presentation a mirror of Brandon's, financial services. Impressive returns, corporate acquisitions. The 2 men were competing even in their choice of graphs, each trying to display more impressive metrics than the other. Maya watched the unspoken battle play out in percentages and profit margins, 2 peacocks with their feathers spread, each convinced they were more vibrant. Through it all, Maya sat silent. Her module stayed dark. She caught James looking at her several times, his expression growing more interested each time she refused to engage in the performance surrounding them. Once, their eyes met across the table, and he raised his wine glass slightly, a private toast to her abstention. She felt something warm unfold in her chest. Something she hadn't expected to feel tonight. The main course arrived, Chilean sea bass with microgreens that had been grown in aeroponic towers on the estate, their roots never touching soil. The fish had been line-caught and flash-frozen within hours, its provenance tracked by blockchain to ensure ethical sourcing. Everything on the plate had a story of sustainability and responsibility, which somehow made the excess feel justified. Aunt Linda waited until everyone had been served before she struck. Maya, dear. Her voice was honey over razor blades. We haven't heard from you. How is your consulting work progressing? Every conversation at the table stopped. 30 people turned to look at Maya. Their attention synchronized like a predator's focus narrowing on prey. Maya set down her fork with careful precision. It's going well, thank you. Any specific clients you'd care to share? Linda pressed. Anyone we might know. I keep my client list confidential. Brandon laughed, the sound sharp enough to cut. That's convenient. Hard to brag about clients that don't exist, Brandon. Richard's voice carried warning, but it was perfunctory. He didn't actually stop his son. I'm just saying, we're all sharing our accomplishments. Maya could at least tell us something about what she's been doing for the past 10 years besides attending NYU and living in a studio apartment. 1 bedroom, Maya corrected quietly. And I'm not sure my work would interest anyone here. Derek leaned forward, his interest predatory. Try us. Maybe consulting means something different in your world. Like how aspiring actor means waiter. Laughter erupted around the table, not everyone, but enough people that the sound built momentum, became permission for others to join in. Maya felt the familiar tightness in her throat, the old shame trying to resurface. She'd built an empire in the shadows, had literally saved her father's business, had sent hundreds of students to college, and still, she was the punchline. James Morrison's voice cut through the laughter like a blade. Hold on. He wasn't loud, but something in his tone made everyone stop. Let me see if I understand this correctly. The table went quiet. James set down his fork, his full attention on the family surrounding him. Maya watched him shift into journalist mode, the casual observer becoming the interrogator. You're all sitting here, performing your success like it's a competitive sport, and you're giving Maya grief for what exactly? He looked around the table, making eye contact with each person who'd laughed. For not performing? For not needing your validation? For having the confidence to exist without a holographic slideshow. Crystal reached for his arm. James, that's not what. I've interviewed hundreds of wealthy people for my work. He pulled away from Crystal's touch, his focus absolute. You know what I've learned? The ones who talk the loudest usually have the least to say. The ones who need the biggest stage are often compensating for the smallest substance. Brandon's face darkened. Who the hell are you to judge us? A Pulitzer-nominated journalist who's made a career out of distinguishing between performance and reality. James turned to Maya, and his expression softened in a way that made her breath catch. Maya, they clearly aren't curious about your actual work, so let me ask, what's your philosophy on success? The question was so unexpected, so genuine, that Maya found herself answering honestly. I think true success is building something meaningful without losing yourself in the process. It's measuring impact instead of optics. Having the courage to live according to your values even when people you love don't understand them. She paused, her voice quieter. Especially when people you love don't understand them. James held her gaze, and something passed between them, recognition, attraction, understanding. That sounds like someone who's actually thought about what matters, or someone who had no choice but to think about it. No. His voice was firm, certain. That's someone who chose depth over display. That's rare. He smiled, slow and devastating. That's annoyingly attractive. The air between them crackled with electricity. Maya felt her pulse quicken. Felt heat rise to her face in a way that had nothing to do with embarrassment and everything to do with being seen, really seen. For the first time in years, Crystal's voice pitched higher, desperate. James, dessert is coming soon. I thought we could talk about my charity work for your article. I have statistics about my platform's reach. Actually, I'm more interested in Maya's story. James didn't look away from Maya's face. The black sheep narrative is always more compelling than the golden children. There's actual complexity there. Actual stakes. Aunt Linda's laugh was cruel. There's not much of a story to tell, I'm afraid. Maya chose art school over business school. She chose poverty over prosperity. She's our family's reminder that even good breeding can have disappointing outcomes. Maya felt the words land like physical blows. Her grandmother's hand found hers under the table, squeezing gently. Margaret's skin was paper thin, her grip surprisingly strong. I didn't choose poverty, Aunt Linda. Maya's voice was quiet but steady. I chose myself. There's a difference. James leaned forward, elbows on the table, his entire body oriented toward Maya like she was the only person in the room. Wait. Let me guess what you really do. His eyes sparkled with something playful, challenging. This is my job, after all, reading people, finding the story underneath the story. Oh? Maya felt herself smile despite everything. You're either a spy, a modern art thief, or you're secretly running something so successful you don't need to talk about it. He tilted his head, studying her. You have this look. What look? Like you know something the rest of us don't. Like you're 3 steps ahead and enjoying watching everyone else try to catch up. His smile was devastating. It's annoyingly attractive. Maya laughed, genuine and surprised. You said that already. I meant it twice. The table had gone completely silent. Crystal looked like she might be sick. Brandon's holographic display had timed out, leaving him sitting in just regular light, suddenly ordinary. Maybe I just know that people who actually have power don't need to announce it at dinner parties, Maya said. James raised his wine glass to her, his gaze intense and focused entirely on her face. See? That. Right there. Spy. Definitely spy. His voice dropped lower, intimate despite the crowd. To mysteries worth solving, their glasses met with a soft chime. Maya felt like the entire room had contracted to just the two of them, everything else fading to background noise. Brandon's voice shattered the moment. James, don't waste your investigative talents on Maya. Trust me, there's no story here. He gestured dismissively at his sister. She's our family's charity case, the phrase hung in the air like poison gas. Maya felt her grandmother's grip tighten. Felt the old wounds trying to reopen, but James's expression shifted into something harder, something that made him look dangerous despite his casual posture. Interesting. In my experience, people who are dismissed often have the most interesting stories. He pulled out his phone, the movement deliberate. See, I do this thing before interviewing people. I research extensively. It's what separates good journalism from puff pieces. Crystal leaned forward, anxious. James, what are you doing? Before I came tonight, I did some digging. Standard procedure, LinkedIn profiles, social media, public records, industry publications. He was scrolling through his phone. Not looking up. And I found something. An industry journal I subscribe to. Very exclusive, very insider. Called Venture Quarterly. He turned his phone screen toward the table. Maya's heart stopped. She knew what he'd found, the feature article published 3 months ago. She'd asked them not to include her photo, but the editor had insisted on at least one professional headshot. This month's cover story, James continued, his voice carrying across the silent table. The 30 under 30, invisible kingmakers of tech. He scrolled to a specific page, then looked up at Maya. Does anyone recognize this person? The holographic projector in the center of the table automatically synced with his phone, blowing up the image above the abandoned dinner plates. Maya's face filled the space between the chandeliers, professional, composed, styled differently than tonight but unmistakably her. The caption read, M. Catherine Chen, number 3, the scout who sees around corners. The table erupted into chaos. Voices overlapped, shocked and confused and disbelieving all at once. Brandon grabbed for James's phone. That can't be Maya. Our Maya, Derek's voice climbed higher. This is a joke, right? Crystal looked between James and Maya, her face cycling through confusion, hurt, and something that might have been betrayal. What is this? James slid his phone across the pristine tablecloth to Maya. His expression a mix of triumph and admiration and something warmer that made her stomach flip. This is you, right? I did my homework before accepting Crystal's invitation. Maya looked at the phone, at her own face projected above the table like an accusation. Everyone was staring at her, 30 people holding their breath, waiting for her to confirm or deny. Her grandmother squeezed her hand one more time, then let go. Permission granted, yes, Maya said quietly. That's me. Richard stood so quickly his chair scraped against the floor. Maya, what is this? James picked up his phone, scrolling as he read aloud. M. Catherine Chen has emerged as one of Silicon Valley's most influential talent scouts and investment advisors. In the past 5 years, she's identified and facilitated the acquisition of 12 major tech companies before they hit mainstream radar. He paused, looking at Brandon specifically. Including ConnectSpace, Technova, and GreenGrid. Her success rate is unprecedented. 89% of her recommended acquisitions have generated returns exceeding 300%. Brandon's face had gone pale. He reached across the table, practically ripping the phone from James's hand. His eyes scanned the screen frantically, his mouth moving as he read. Wait. Technova. We just acquired Technova's venture arm. That was the cornerstone of my promotion. Keep reading, James said softly. Brandon's voice shook as he read the next paragraph. Chen's most recent achievement was identifying Technova's untapped potential 18 months before Sterling Heights Capital's acquisition. Industry insiders confirm Chen received a substantial finder's fee and retained a 12% advisory stake in the acquired portfolio. He looked up at Maya, his expression something between shock and fury. 12%, it was renegotiated to 15% after due diligence, Maya said calmly. The initial assessment undervalued several key assets. The table exploded again. Crystal stood abruptly, her chair tipping backward. A server caught it before it crashed. Wait. Crystal's hands were shaking. 15% of, that means you own a piece of, her voice climbed higher. The companies I promote? The brands I work with. James was already doing math on his phone's calculator. Crystal, what brands are you currently partnering with? Crystal's response came automatically, muscle memory from typing the same list in hundreds of emails. LuxTech, StreamStyle, Urban Nest, FemForward, EcoGlow, all part of Technova's portfolio, James finished. He looked at Maya with undisguised admiration. Which means Maya technically owns a piece of Crystal's income stream, a very small piece, Maya said. But yes, Derek's voice cut through the noise. How much did you make on the Technova deal? Total compensation, Maya set down her wine glass. The room waited. Even the bioluminescent flowers seemed to pulse brighter, responding to the collective spike in heart rates around the table, including the finder's fee, equity stake, and ongoing advisory percentage. The deal will generate approximately $8.4 million over the next 3 years. The silence that followed was absolute. Someone's fork clattered against a plate. In the kitchen, the smart refrigerator beeped as it registered temperature fluctuations from the door being left open. Normal sound suddenly amplified by the absence of human noise. Aunt Linda recovered first. This is absurd. If Maya had achieved this kind of success, we would know. She would have told us, would she? James's voice was quiet but sharp. Look how you're all reacting right now. You called her a charity case 30 minutes ago. Margaret Chen spoke for the first time since dinner began. Her voice was clear, steady, carrying the weight of her 84 years. I knew. Every head swiveled toward the family matriarch. I've known about Maya's career for 5 years. She told me when she made her first million. Margaret's expression was serene, almost pleased. Do you know what she did with that money? No one answered. The question hung there, unanswerable, because none of them had ever bothered to ask Maya about her life. She established an anonymous scholarship fund for first-generation college students studying entrepreneurship and social innovation. 50 students per year. Full tuition, housing, living expenses. She sent 250 students through college in 5 years. Vivian's hand went to her throat. That's more than my entire charitable foundation has awarded in a decade. It's more than your foundation has awarded in its entire existence, Vivian. I looked at the numbers. Margaret's smile was small, satisfied. Maya also anonymously funded the expansion of the Hartford Women's Shelter. And the renovation of the Brooklyn Youth Arts Center. And a dozen other projects that will never have her name attached. Richard sat down heavily. His face had gone ashen. Maya. K. Chen. Catherine Chen. The consultant who saved my properties. His voice cracked slightly. That was you? Maya met her father's eyes. 10 years of distance compressed into this single moment. Yes, but why? After everything, after I threw you out, why would you help me? Because they were good properties being mismanaged. Because the green tech pivot was the right strategy. Because the Williamsburg building was going into foreclosure and taking 200 jobs with it. Maya's voice stayed steady. And because they were yours. I couldn't watch you fail. Richard's eyes were wet. He blinked rapidly, looking away. Vivian's voice was barely audible. You've been secretly helping your father? For 8 months. The Hartford properties weren't far behind Williamsburg. They would have defaulted within 6 months. Brandon stood abruptly. Okay, fine. So you've had some success. That doesn't change the fact that you live in a shoebox apartment and drive a car that belongs in a museum. If you're so successful, why live like you're broke? Maya looked at her brother, really looked at him. Saw his expensive suit, his designer watch, his need to display every achievement like a trophy. Saw the insecurity underneath all that performance, because I'm not performing for anyone, Brandon. This is how I want to live. Small apartment, old car, second-hand clothes, these aren't compromises. They're choices. James spoke softly, but everyone heard him. Their values. Maya looked at him gratefully. Yes, Derek wouldn't let it go. But what's the point? What's the point of making millions if you don't spend it? James answered before Maya could. Maybe because she measures wealth differently than you do. Maybe she's building something sustainable instead of something impressive. He looked at Maya with open admiration. Maybe she's actually successful instead of just looking successful. Crystal had been silent, her face cycling through emotions too quickly to track. When she finally spoke, her voice was small, wounded. So this whole time, while I've been building my brand, working myself to death for followers and partnerships, you've been what? Secretly rich? Secretly important? Crystal, you let us pity you. Crystal's voice climbed higher, breaking. You sat there while we felt sorry for you, while we tried to help you, she stopped, realization dawning across her face like a slow-motion car crash. Oh my God. Did you laugh at us? Did you think we were all pathetic? No. I never thought that. All my brand deals. All my partnerships. The companies I've spent years cultivating relationships with. Crystal's hands were shaking. You owned pieces of them this whole time. You were profiting from my work while letting me think I was the successful one. Maya felt something crack in her chest. Crystal had been silent, her face cycling through emotions too quickly to track. When she finally spoke, her voice was small, wounded. So this whole time, while I've been building my brand, working myself to death for followers and partnerships, you've been what? Secretly rich? Secretly important. Maya felt the accusation land like a physical blow. Crystal, you let us pity you. Crystal's voice climbed higher, breaking on the last word. You sat there while we felt sorry for you, while we tried to help you, she stopped, realization dawning across her face like a slow-motion car crash. Oh my God. Did you laugh at us? Did you think we were all pathetic? No. I never thought that. All my brand deals. All my partnerships. The companies I've spent years cultivating relationships with. Crystal's hands were shaking so badly she had to set down her wine glass before she dropped it. You owned pieces of them this whole time. You were profiting from my work while letting me think I was the successful one. While letting me think I'd finally made something of myself. The last sentence came out barely above a whisper, and Maya heard all the insecurity underneath it. The girl from Queens who'd spent years trying to prove she belonged in rooms like this, only to discover the family failure had been more successful than her all along. Crystal, your success is real. You built your platform yourself. I didn't, don't. Crystal stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Don't patronize me. Not now. Not after this. She looked at Brandon, her eyes filling with tears. I need to go. I can't, I need air. She walked out, her designer heels clicking against the marble floor in rapid staccato. Brandon half stood, caught between following his wife and maintaining his position at the table. He chose the latter, sitting back down with a tight expression that suggested this was somehow Maya's fault. The silence stretched. Maya felt 30 pairs of eyes on her, felt the weight of expectations and judgments pressing down like physical force. Her throat was tight, her hands clenched in her lap beneath the table. She'd imagined this moment before, the revelation, the family finally knowing the truth, but never like this. Never with Crystal feeling humiliated, never with this cocktail of shock and resentment poisoning the air. Margaret reached over and squeezed Maya's hand. The gesture was small, hidden beneath the tablecloth, but it steadied her. I think, Richard said slowly, his voice still shell-shocked, we need to understand the full scope of what we're learning tonight. He looked at Maya, really looked at her, and she saw a stranger trying to reconcile the daughter he'd thrown out with the woman sitting before him. You've been working as an investment advisor and talent scout for, How long? 7 years professionally. 9 if you count the internship where I learned the business. And your net worth? Derek asked bluntly. Maya hesitated. The number felt obscene to say aloud, especially in a room full of people who'd spent a decade assuming she was broke. Approximately $47 million, she said quietly. As of last quarter. It fluctuates with market conditions and the performance of my portfolio companies. Vivian made a sound somewhere between a gasp and a laugh. 47 million. You have $47 million, and you live in, what did you say, a one-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn? A very nice one-bedroom apartment, with a car that's 10 years old, Brandon added, his voice sharp. With clothes from thrift stores. With a life that looks like you're barely scraping by, a life that looks like I'm living according to my values, Maya corrected. There's a difference. Aunt Linda had been silent, her face cycling through various stages of processing. When she spoke, her voice had lost its usual condescending edge, replaced by something that sounded almost like fear. All those dinners. All those events where we felt sorry for you. Where we made jokes about your situation. You just sat there and took it? What was I supposed to do? Maya met her aunt's eyes. Interrupt your presentations with actually, I made $3 million last quarter? Correct you every time you made assumptions about my life? Prove myself to people who'd already decided I was a failure? Yes. Brandon's voice exploded across the table. That's exactly what you should have done. Instead of sitting there like some kind of martyr, letting us think, he stopped, his face reddening. Do you have any idea how this makes us look? How embarrassing this is, James had been quietly observing, but now he spoke, his voice cool and measured. Embarrassing for whom, exactly? For you, because you've spent years punching down at someone who was actually more successful than you? Or embarrassing because your little sister had the integrity to build something meaningful while you were busy performing? Stay out of this, Brandon snapped. This is family business. You made it my business when you invited me to document it. James leaned back in his chair, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp. And for what it's worth, I think Maya showed remarkable restraint. Most people in her position would have rubbed your faces in their success. She just lived her life. Quietly. Without needing your validation or permission, or honesty, Derek interjected. Let's not pretend this isn't a massive deception. She lied to us for years. I never lied, Maya said firmly. I told you I was a consultant. That's true. I told you I worked in tech. Also true. You made assumptions about what that meant. And I didn't correct them. That's not the same as lying, it's deception by omission, Vivian said, her voice tight. Which is still a form of dishonesty. Maya felt anger kindle in her chest, hot and righteous. You want to talk about honesty? Fine. Let's be honest. She looked around the table, meeting each family member's eyes in turn. Aunt Linda, your charitable foundation is a tax shelter that donates less than 15% of its annual budget to actual causes. The rest goes to administrative costs and event planning. Brandon, your last 3 quarterly reports inflated returns by including unrealized gains you'll never actually see. And Mom, she turned to Vivian. Your gala photos are filtered and professionally edited to make it look like twice as many people attended as actually showed up. You're charging sponsors for exposure to an audience that doesn't exist. The table went dead silent. Maya could hear her own heartbeat, could feel adrenaline making her hands shake. So if we're talking about honesty and deception, she continued, her voice quieter now but no less intense, maybe we should acknowledge that this entire family has built its reputation on performance and perception rather than substance. I'm just the only one who opted out of the performance. That's enough, Richard said, but his voice lacked conviction. He looked shaken. Older somehow than he had an hour ago, is it? Margaret spoke up, her voice carrying surprising strength. Because I think Maya's barely scratched the surface. She turned to Richard. Your son's promotion was built on an acquisition your daughter facilitated. Your wife's charitable work doesn't hold a candle to what your daughter has done anonymously. Your business was saved by the child you threw out for choosing the wrong career path. She paused, letting that sink in. So perhaps before anyone lectures Maya about honesty, we should examine our own relationships with the truth. The silence that followed was suffocating. Maya felt dizzy, overwhelmed by how quickly everything had unraveled. This wasn't how she'd wanted it to happen, not with anger and accusations, not with Crystal feeling betrayed, not with this bitter taste of victory that felt more like loss. Her phone buzzed in her clutch. She pulled it out discreetly, a text from Sienna. Just saw Crystal's Instagram story. She posted then deleted something about family betrayal. Are you okay? Do I need to come get you? Maya typed back quickly, it's complicated. I'll call you later. When she looked up, James was watching her. His expression was softer than before, concerned. He caught her eye and tilted his head slightly toward the door, a silent question. Do you want to leave? Maya shook her head fractionally. Not yet. She'd started this, she needed to see it through. Derek cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the emotions saturating the room. Okay, so Maya's successful. That's great. Good for you, really. But what's the plan now? You just keep living like a broke college student while you're worth more than most of this family combined. What's the end game? There is no end game, Maya said. This is just my life. I work on projects that interest me. I invest in companies I believe in. I support causes I care about. I live modestly because that's what feels right to me, not because I'm making some grand statement. But why? Vivian's voice cracked slightly. Why hide it? Why not share your success with your family? Why not let us celebrate with you? Maya looked at her mother, really looked at her, and saw genuine confusion there, genuine hurt. Vivian actually didn't understand. She'd spent so many years measuring worth by display that the concept of choosing privacy over performance was genuinely incomprehensible to her. Because you would have made it about you, Maya said quietly. You would have thrown galas to celebrate. Posted about it on social media. Used it to elevate the family brand. You would have turned my success into another performance, another opportunity to prove the Chen family superiority. She paused, her voice softer. And I didn't want that. I wanted my success to be mine. Private. Meaningful. Not another trophy in the Chen family display case. Vivian looked like she'd been slapped. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came out. That's not fair, Brandon said, but he sounded uncertain, isn't it? James asked. He'd pulled out his notebook, was writing in quick shorthand. Because from where I'm sitting, Maya's assessment seems pretty accurate. This family has spent the entire evening performing for each other. Holographic presentations. Curated metrics. Carefully crafted narratives of success. The only person who wasn't performing was Maya. He looked up, his eyes finding Maya's across the table. And she's the only one who had anything real to say. The compliment landed in Maya's chest like warmth. Like validation, like being seen. She felt her face flush, felt something electric pass between them, recognition, attraction, possibility. Crystal reappeared in the doorway, her face blotchy from crying. She'd fixed her makeup, but her eyes were still red-rimmed. I called my publicist, she announced, her voice hollow. I wanted to know which of my brand partners were part of Technova's portfolio. Do you want to know how many? No one answered. 19, Crystal continued. 19 of my current active partnerships are with companies in that portfolio. Which means every time I post, every time I create content, every time I negotiate a contract, her voice broke. Maya makes money. Off my work. Off my audience. Off everything I've built. Crystal, that's not, Maya started, and the worst part? Crystal laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. The absolute worst part? I spent 3 months pitching myself to Femme Forward for their brand ambassador program. 3 months. I restructured my entire content strategy to appeal to their demographic. I turned down other opportunities to show them my commitment. And they finally said yes last month. She looked directly at Maya. Did you have anything to do with that? Did you put in a word? Did they choose me because of my content or because I'm married to your brother? Maya's stomach dropped. She had put in a word, one casual comment to the femme-forward CEO at a tech conference about Crystal's work ethic and engagement rates. Nothing that would have made or broken the decision, but enough that Crystal's question wasn't unfounded. I mentioned your platform in passing at a conference, Maya admitted. But the decision was based on your metrics. They would have chosen you anyway, you don't know that. Crystal's voice was flat. None of us knows that now. Everything I've achieved is tainted by the possibility that it only happened because of you. Because the family failure was secretly pulling strings, Brandon stood, putting his arm around Crystal's shoulders. For once, the gesture seemed genuine, protective rather than performative. I think we need to leave, Brandon, Richard started. No. Brandon looked around the table. His expression a mixture of anger and humiliation. This is too much. Crystal's right. Everything feels compromised now. Maya, I don't know what you were trying to accomplish by hiding all this, but congratulations. You've successfully made us all feel like idiots. He guided Crystal toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I worked my ass off for that promotion. Whatever you did with Technova, I earned my position based on merit. Remember that when you're judging how the rest of us measure success. They left. The door closing behind them sounded unnaturally loud in the silence. Aunt Linda stood next, her movements stiff and dignified. I think it's time for Derek and me to go as well. This evening has become rather uncomfortable. She looked at Maya, her expression unreadable. I won't apologize for the things I've said about you over the years. I made judgments based on the information available. But perhaps, she paused, and something almost like respect flickered across her face. Perhaps I should have asked more questions before making assumptions. It was the closest thing to an apology Maya had ever heard from her aunt. Linda and Derek left together, their departure prompting several other guests to make polite excuses and filter out. Within 10 minutes, only family remained: Richard, Vivian, Margaret, Maya, and James, who seemed uncertain whether he should leave or stay. Stay, Margaret said, as if reading his mind. You're part of this story now, whether you intended to be or not. And I suspect Maya could use an ally. James settled back into his chair, his expression grateful. Under the table, his foot brushed against Maya's, whether accidentally or intentionally, she couldn't tell. The contact sent electricity up her leg. Richard stood, walking to the window that overlooked the estate gardens. The bioluminescent flowers outside cast shifting patterns of blue and green light across his face. When he spoke, his voice was rough. 10 years ago, I gave you an ultimatum. Business school or nothing. The Chin family path or no path at all. He turned to face Maya. I thought I was teaching you about the real world. About making practical choices. About understanding that dreams don't pay bills. Dad, let me finish. He held up a hand. I threw you out because I thought you were being naive. Childish. I thought you'd come back in a few weeks, ready to be realistic. When you didn't, I told myself you were stubborn. Proud. That you'd rather suffer than admit you were wrong. He paused, his eyes bright with unshed tears. I never considered that maybe I was the one who was wrong. That maybe you understood something I didn't. That maybe choosing meaning over money wasn't naive, it was wise. Maya felt her own tears threatening. She blinked them back. You built an empire, Richard continued. Not just financially, though that's impressive. But you built it on your terms, with your values intact. You helped people. Funded educations. Supported causes. And when my business was failing, when my pride and my mistakes were about to cost me everything, his voice cracked. You saved me. Without asking for credit. Without demanding apologies or acknowledgement. You just did it. Because it was right, I couldn't let you lose everything, Maya said softly. Despite everything, you're still my father. Vivian made a sound, half sob, half laugh. how do you do that? How do you have any generosity left for us after the way we've treated you? Maya didn't have a good answer. She'd asked herself the same question countless times over the years. Why keep showing up to dinners where she was mocked? Why help her father when he'd thrown her out? Why maintain relationships with people who made her feel small? Because cutting you off completely would mean you won, she finally said. It would mean I internalized your judgment. Believed your assessment of my worth. By showing up, by being exactly who I am without apology, I was proving, mostly to myself, that your opinions didn't define me. That's incredibly mature, James said quietly. And slightly devastating. Maya met his eyes across the table. The look they exchanged was loaded with everything unspoken: admiration, attraction, understanding, possibility. She felt her breath catch. Vivian stood abruptly. I need to process this. All of it. But Maya, she paused at the door. I'm sorry. For the assumptions. For the condescension. For not asking about your life instead of assuming I knew it. I'm sorry. She left quickly, her heels clicking rapidly against the marble, fleeing before emotion overtook her. Richard lingered longer. He walked to Maya's chair, stood beside her for a moment without speaking. Then he bent and kissed the top of her head, a gesture he hadn't made since she was a child. I'm proud of you, he whispered. I should have said that 10 years ago. I'm saying it now. He left, his shoulders stooped in a way that made him look vulnerable, human, fallible. The estate suddenly felt enormous and empty. Only Margaret, Maya, and James remained at the long table, 3 people surrounded by 30 empty chairs and the detritus of abandoned meals. Well, Margaret said with a small smile. That could have gone worse, Maya laughed, surprised by the sound. Could it? Oh yes. No one threw anything. No police were called. I'd say we came out ahead. Margaret stood slowly, using her cane for support. Maya, dear, walk me to my room? Of course, Grandma. James. Margaret turned to him with a knowing look. Don't leave yet. I suspect you and Maya have things to discuss. And the gardens are quite lovely this time of evening. The bioluminescent roses bloom brightest around 10. She left with that explicit permission hanging in the air, her meaning unmistakable. Maya and James looked at each other across the empty table. The holographic projectors had finally timed out, leaving just candlelight and the soft glow from the gardens outside. Suddenly the enormous room felt intimate, so, James said, a slow smile spreading across his face. You're secretly a tech mogul who lives like a graduate student and anonymously saves failing businesses while funding scholarships. That's quite a story. You're not going to write about this, are you? Maya asked, suddenly worried. Tonight was supposed to be background research, not relax. He held up his hands. I'm not writing anything without your permission. Though I have to say, from a journalistic perspective, it's a hell of a narrative. The underestimated daughter who builds an empire in secret while her family mocks her, then reveals her success in the most dramatic fashion possible. He paused. Though I may have had a small hand in forcing that reveal sooner than you planned, you think? I'm sorry if I overstepped. But watching them tear you down, call you a charity case, his jaw tightened. I couldn't just sit there. You deserved better, you barely know me, true. He stood, walking around the table until he was standing beside her chair. But I'm good at reading people, remember? And everything I've seen tonight confirms what I suspected when I first saw you standing by that window. You're the real thing. Authentic. Substantial. Actually successful instead of just looking successful. He offered his hand. Walk with me? Your grandmother recommended the gardens, and I'm inclined to trust her judgment. Maya looked at his hand, strong, ink-stained from his note-taking, extended with casual confidence. She could say no, could go home to her apartment, could process this impossible evening alone. Or she could take his hand and see what happened next. The choice felt significant, weighted with possibility. She took his hand. The gardens were cooler than the dining room, the air carrying the scent of engineered roses that bloomed in impossible colors. deep purples that shifted to blue under the moonlight, whites that glowed with their own bioluminescence. The pathways were lined with solar stones that had absorbed sunlight all day and now released it in gentle amber pulses, creating pools of warmth in the darkness. Maya's hand was still in James's, and neither of them had let go. They walked in silence for a moment, the sounds of the estate fading behind them, muted voices. Car doors closing as the last guests departed, the soft hum of the house's environmental systems adjusting temperature and humidity. Maya felt the tension of the evening slowly unwinding from her shoulders, replaced by a different kind of tension entirely, the awareness of James beside her, the heat of his palm against hers, the way he shortened his stride to match hers. "Your grandmother is terrifying in the best possible way," James said finally, breaking the silence. "That whole I've known for 5 years reveal? Perfect timing. Devastating delivery. She's been sitting on that information like a chess grandmaster waiting for checkmate," Maya laughed softly. "She told me once that patience is the ultimate power move." I didn't understand what she meant until tonight. She orchestrated this, didn't she? The seating arrangement. Insisting you come. Even inviting me. He stopped walking, turning to face her. She knew I'd been looking for the anonymous blogger who wrote that charity case piece. She knew I'd recognize the phrase when your aunt used it. She wanted me to connect the dots. Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. "How do you know about that blog post?" "It was anonymous. I never used identifying details. I'm an investigative journalist. It's literally my job to find patterns and connections." He smiled, but there was something serious beneath it. The writing style matched articles published under M. Catherine Chen in industry journals. The timeline aligned with major tech acquisitions you facilitated. And the philosophy, measuring success by impact rather than income, building quietly instead of broadcasting, it was all there. I've been trying to track down the author for 8 months. Then Crystal mentioned her husband had a sister named Maya who was the family disappointment, and I thought, what are the odds? So you came here to expose me? Maya tried to pull her hand away, but he held on gently. "I came here to meet you," he corrected. "There's a difference. I wasn't sure you were the author until I saw how your family treated you. The casual cruelty. The dismissiveness. The way you absorbed it without reacting. That took practice. Years of practice." His thumb brushed across her knuckles, a small gesture that sent warmth spiraling up her arm. "I wanted to meet the person who could build an empire while being treated like a failure. That takes a special kind of strength, or a special kind of stubbornness. Those are often the same thing." He started walking again, still holding her hand, leading them deeper into the gardens where the path curved around a fountain that cycled through holographic water patterns, cascading, spiraling, freezing mid-fall before starting over. "The question I keep coming back to is why? You could have cut them off completely. Changed your name, moved across the country, built your life without the constant reminder of their judgment. Why keep coming back?" Maya watched the holographic water freeze and fall, freeze and fall. "I asked myself that same question for years. At first, it was Grandma Margaret. She was the only one who believed in me, who told me to go to NYU despite my parents' ultimatum. I couldn't abandon her." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "But it was more than that. If I cut them off completely, it would mean they'd won. Their rejection would have defined me. By showing up, by being exactly who I am without apology or explanation. I was proving to myself that their opinions didn't have power over me anymore. That's remarkably healthy for someone who was essentially disowned at 17. I had good therapy." Maya smiled slightly. "And spite. Never underestimate spite as a motivational force." James laughed, the sound genuine and surprised. "Spite built an empire. That should be your memoir title." "I'm not writing a memoir, you should. Though I have to warn you, after tonight, you might not have a choice. This story is going to get out. Your family knows now, which means their friends will know, which means society pages and business journals will start connecting dots. Catherine Chen is about to become much less mysterious." The thought made Maya's stomach tighten. She'd spent years protecting her privacy, keeping her professional success separate from her family name. The idea of that separation dissolving, of becoming a public figure, a story for people to dissect and discuss, it felt like losing something precious. Hey. James stopped walking again, using his free hand to tilt her chin up so she had to meet his eyes. You don't have to handle it alone. I meant what I said about not publishing without your permission. And if you want help managing the narrative when it does break, I know people. Publicists who are actually good at their jobs, not just good at taking photos for Instagram. Why are you being so nice to me? Maya asked. Genuinely confused. You came here for a story about wealth influencers and materialism. Instead you got family drama and a woman who lives in a one-bedroom apartment despite being worth $47 million. That's not the article you planned, no, he agreed. It's a much better article. But more importantly, his hand was still under her chin, his thumb now tracing along her jawline in a way that made coherent thought difficult. You're much more interesting than any article. Smart, successful, principled, and apparently immune to the corrupting influence of wealth. You're basically a unicorn. I thought you said you didn't believe in unicorns. I said I'd never found one. Past tense. Present circumstances may require me to revise that assessment. His smile was slow, devastating, the kind of smile that suggested he knew exactly what effect he was having on her. Also, you should know, that thing your aunt said about you being annoyingly attractive? She wasn't wrong. Except I'd remove the annoying part. Maya felt heat flood her face. You're very forward for someone I met 3 hours ago. Life's short. I see something I want, I'm clear about it. He lowered his hand but didn't step back, leaving them standing close enough that Maya could feel the warmth radiating from his body, could smell his cologne, something subtle with cedar notes. But if I'm reading this wrong, tell me now and I'll back off. I don't want to be another person pressuring you into something you don't want. The consideration in his voice, the genuine care, the way he was offering her an out while also making his interest crystal clear, it was intoxicating. Maya had dated before, had relationships, but none of them had felt like this. Like standing at the edge of something significant. Like choosing to jump would change everything. You're not reading it wrong, she said quietly, his smile widened. Good. Because I have about 1,000 questions about your career, your philosophy, how you identified companies before they hit mainstream, and whether you'd be willing to let me write a profile piece that actually does you justice. But first, he leaned in, his intention clear, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. I'd like to kiss you, if that's okay, in my grandmother's garden? Where anyone could see, in your grandmother's garden, where she explicitly sent us to be alone together. I think she'd approve. Maya found herself laughing even as her heart raced. My grandmother is 94 years old, your grandmother is a romantic who's been watching you be lonely for a decade. Trust me, she's rooting for this. He paused, his lips inches from hers. But if you want to wait, Maya closed the distance between them. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, both of them learning the shape of this new thing between them. Then James's hand came up to cradle the back of her head, his fingers threading through her hair, and the kiss deepened into something that made Maya's knees weak. She gripped his jacket, pulling him closer, tasting wine and promise and possibility. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, James rested his forehead against hers. Okay, he said, his voice rough. That was, yeah, should we, probably not here. The gardens have security cameras, James laughed, pulling back enough to look at her properly. His hair was disheveled where she'd run her fingers through it, his lips slightly swollen. He looked undone in a way that made satisfaction bloom warm in Maya's chest. Your place or mine? And before you answer, know that I'm staying at a hotel in Hartford that has those weird automated check-in kiosks and paper-thin walls. My apartment is in Brooklyn, that's an hour and a half away, I know. Maya felt bold, reckless, like someone who'd spent the evening revealing secrets might as well reveal one more. But it's worth it. And you did say you had 1,000 questions, I did say that. James laced his fingers through hers again, starting to lead them back toward the estate. Though I'm warning you, if we go to your apartment, I'm going to want to stay. See how you live. Understand how someone worth 47 million furnishes a one-bedroom in Brooklyn. It's research. Right, very important research. For the article I'm definitely not writing without your permission. They were both grinning like idiots, the earlier tension of the evening transmuted into this, flirtation, chemistry, the giddy rush of new attraction. Maya felt lighter than she had in years, like some weight she'd been carrying had finally been set down. They were halfway back to the house when Maya's phone buzzed insistently. She pulled it out, 7 missed calls from Sienna, 3 from an unknown number, and a text from her father that made her stop walking. What is it? James asked, concern replacing his earlier playfulness. Maya read the text aloud. Family meeting tomorrow. 10 a.m. My office. We need to discuss the future of Chin Properties and your role in it. Please come. We have things to make right. That's surprisingly direct for him. He's not usually this direct. Maya felt unease creep back in. Something's wrong. Or something's changed. I don't know which. Her phone buzzed again, this time a call from Vivian. Maya hesitated, then answered. Mom, Maya. Her mother's voice was thick, like she'd been crying. Have you seen Crystal's social media? No, I've been. Why? She posted something. About tonight. About you. It's already going viral. Maya's stomach dropped. She pulled up Instagram on her phone. Navigating to Crystal's profile. The most recent post was from 15 minutes ago, a photo of the dinner table, empty now, with a long caption that Maya's eyes skimmed over with growing dread. Tonight I learned that success isn't always what it looks like. That the person I pitied was actually the one who had it all figured out. That building something meaningful matters more than building something impressive. My sister-in-law taught me that lesson, and I'm still processing how it makes me feel. Grateful? Jealous? Humbled? All of the above. But mostly I'm sorry. Sorry for the assumptions. Sorry for the performance. Sorry for not asking questions before making judgments. To anyone who's ever felt like the black sheep. The disappointment, the one who doesn't fit, maybe you're not the problem. Maybe you're just the only one being real. #authenticity, #family lessons, #success redefined. The post had already accumulated over 50,000 likes and 3,000 comments. Maya scrolled through them, people sharing their own stories of family rejection, of choosing unconventional paths, of being underestimated. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive, with many people asking about Maya specifically, wanting to know her story. She didn't tag you, Vivian said. She didn't mention your name or your business. But people are connecting dots. Business reporters, tech journalists, they're already reaching out to me for comment. What did you tell them? That the family has no comment at this time. Vivian paused. Maya, I think Crystal's post was her way of apologizing. Of processing everything publicly because that's how she processes everything. But it's opened a door. By tomorrow morning, every major business publication will be trying to identify the mysterious Catherine Chen and connect her to the Chen family, so my anonymity is officially over. I'm afraid so. But Maya, her mother's voice softened. Maybe that's not entirely bad. Maybe it's time for people to know the full story. Not the version we've been telling, where you're the family disappointment. The real version. Where you're the success story we were too blind to see. Maya ended the call feeling dizzy. Everything was moving too fast, the dinner revelation, James, Crystal's post, the imminent exposure of her carefully maintained private life. She looked at James, who was watching her with concern. The story's breaking, she said simply. By tomorrow, everyone will know, then we get ahead of it. James's voice was firm, decisive, the journalist in him already strategizing. You give one interview, exclusive, on your terms, to someone you trust. You control the narrative. Tell your story your way before someone else tells it for you. And who would I trust with that? Me. He said it without hesitation. I'll write it fairly. I'll check every quote with you before publication. And I'll make damn sure that the story that goes out is about your success and your values, not about family drama or revenge narratives. You deserve better than to be turned into a cautionary tale or an inspirational meme." Maya studied his face in the amber light from the solar stones. He looked earnest, trustworthy, and still slightly disheveled from their kiss. Trusting him felt risky. But then, everything tonight had been risky. "Okay," she said. "You can write the story. But I want approval over every word. And I want to make something clear, this isn't a revenge story. This isn't about proving my family wrong or rubbing their faces in my success. It's about living authentically and measuring success by impact." "Can you write that?" "I can write that. Because that's the truth." He squeezed her hand. "Now, do you still want to go back to Brooklyn, or do you need to stay and deal with this?" Maya looked back at the estate, lit up like a monument to wealth and status, full of people who'd spent years underestimating her. Then she looked at James, rough around the edges, genuinely interested in who she was rather than what she represented, offering partnership instead of judgment. "Brooklyn," she decided. "Whatever happens tomorrow, I want tonight to be mine. Not about my family, not about the story breaking, not about managing the narrative. Just, mine, ours," James corrected softly. "Ours." They drove separately, James following Maya's taillights as she navigated back into the city, the old Honda somehow keeping pace despite its age. The drive gave Maya time to think, to process the evening's upheaval. Her phone kept buzzing with notifications, but she ignored them all. Tomorrow she would deal with the fallout. Tonight she was choosing something for herself. Her apartment was exactly as she'd left it, small, comfortable, furnished with an eclectic mix of thrift store finds and a few carefully chosen pieces. The exposed brick gave it character. The view wasn't impressive, but the light was good. She'd built a life here that felt honest, unperformative, hers. James looked around with undisguised fascination when she let him in. "This is really where you live. I told you I wasn't performing, I believe you now." He moved to the bookshelf that took up an entire wall, an actual bookshelf with actual physical books, not digital readers or holographic displays. His fingers traced the spines. Business theory, philosophy, 3 copies of Sun Tzu, novels in about 6 different genres, and, is that a first edition of The Fountainhead? I don't agree with Ayn Rand's philosophy, but I appreciate the craftsmanship of a first edition. You're full of contradictions. He turned to face her, leaning against the bookshelf. Wealthy but modest. Successful but private. Principled but pragmatic. How do you hold all of that together without cognitive dissonance? Who says I don't have cognitive dissonance? Maya kicked off her shoes, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline of the evening was wearing off, leaving her wrung out. "I question my choices constantly. Wonder if I should be more visible, more philanthropic, more engaged. But then I remember why I chose this path in the first place. Because the alternative, performing wealth, measuring worth by displays of status, it felt empty. Meaningless." James crossed the room to where she stood, his hand settling gently on her shoulders. "You're tired. I should go, let you process." "Stay." Maya caught his hand. "You said you wanted to. That you wanted to understand how I live. So stay. Ask your 1,000 questions. Help me figure out what to say when the world comes knocking tomorrow, okay?" He smiled, that devastating smile that made her stomach flip. "But first, you're going to change into something comfortable because I can see you're exhausted, and I'm going to make tea because I saw your kettle and an impressive collection of loose-leaf varieties. Then we're going to sit on your very comfortable-looking second-hand couch, and you're going to tell me the story of Catherine Chen from the beginning. Not the version for publication, just the real version. The one where you're human and scared and brilliant and occasionally petty. Deal?" "Deal." 20 minutes later, they were settled on her couch, Maya in yoga pants and an oversized NYU sweatshirt, James with his jacket off and his sleeves rolled up, both of them holding mugs of oolong tea. The intimacy of it struck Maya, sharing her space, her story, her private self with someone she'd met hours ago. It should have felt too fast, too much. Instead it felt inevitable, like they'd been moving toward this moment since he'd first caught her eye across the dinner table. So, James prompted. Beginning. You were 17, holding a NYU acceptance letter. Maya told him everything. The ultimatum. The first terrible year living in a tiny dorm room, working 3 part-time jobs, surviving on instant ramen and the occasional meal shared with friends who understood poverty because they lived it too. The internship at the small VC firm where she'd been hired to make coffee and had stayed late every night, teaching herself to read market analyses and spot trends. The moment she'd identified ConnectSpace, a video chat app everyone dismissed as too niche, and convinced a junior partner to take a chance on her instinct. The 3-year wait while that instinct proved right, the app getting acquired, her finder's fee launching her real career. I was 22 when I made my first million. She said quietly. I sat in my apartment, not this one, an even smaller one in Queens, and I cried. Not happy tears. Scared tears. Because I knew that money changed things. That I could call my parents, tell them I'd succeeded, prove them wrong. But I also knew that if I did that, the success wouldn't be mine anymore. It would become part of the family narrative. Maya struggled, but we always knew she'd figure it out. I'd be reabsorbed, redeemed, made acceptable again, so you kept it secret, I kept it private. There's a difference. I told Grandma Margaret because she'd earned my trust. I told Sienna because she'd been with me through everything. But I didn't tell my parents because they'd only thrown me out. They never apologized. Never reached out, never acknowledged that maybe their ultimatum had been cruel. I wasn't ready to let them back in. James set down his tea, shifting to face her more directly. And now? After tonight, now I don't know. Maya felt the weight of uncertainty settling over her. Part of me wants to forgive them. To build something new based on honesty instead of performance. But another part of me knows they only care now because my success is visible. If I was still just Maya the consultant with no public achievements to point to, they'd still be treating me like a charity case. That's fair. But people can change. Your father seemed genuinely remorseful tonight. Your mother too. Even Crystal's post was, in its own performative way, an attempt at accountability. You think I should forgive them. I think you should do whatever feels right for you. James reached over, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was tender, intimate. But I also think holding on to anger takes energy. Energy you could spend on other things. Building your business. Funding more scholarships. Kissing journalists who are definitely falling for you way too fast. Maya felt her breath catch. Too fast, way too fast. It's been like 4 hours. I'm supposed to maintain professional distance. Be objective. Not sit on your couch thinking about how much I want to kiss you again. His hand was still in her hair, his thumb tracing the shell of her ear. But apparently I have no self-control where you're concerned. I'm not complaining, no? He leaned in, his lips brushing against hers softly. Good, they kissed again, slower this time, deeper, with the comfortable knowledge that they had time. No cameras, no family watching, just the two of them in Maya's small apartment with its second-hand furniture and first-edition books. When they finally broke apart, James pulled her against his side, her head resting on his shoulder. Tell me the rest, he murmured. How you went from one successful investment to becoming one of the most influential scouts in Silicon Valley. So Maya told him. The pattern recognition that let her identify promising startups. The relationships built on honesty and respect rather than flashy pitches. The philosophy that good companies solved real problems for real people, not manufactured needs for manufactured markets. The quiet satisfaction of being right, of watching companies she'd believed in succeed beyond anyone's expectations. And your father's properties? James asked. How did that start? I saw a news article about Chin Properties facing difficulties. 3 commercial real estate holdings going into foreclosure. I did some research, realized the problem wasn't the properties themselves, the locations were good, the buildings solid. The problem was obsolete usage. Old office spaces no one wanted anymore. She paused, remembering the decision point. I could have let it happen. Let him fail. It would have been karmic justice for throwing me out. But those properties employed people. And they were his life's work, even if he'd mismanaged them. So I reached out anonymously, offered consulting services, and helped pivot them to green tech spaces. Made him millions. He never knew it was me until tonight. That's not revenge, James observed. That's grace, maybe. Or maybe it's the ultimate revenge, succeeding so thoroughly that you can afford to save the people who hurt you without needing their gratitude. Maya smiled slightly. I haven't decided which interpretation I prefer, both can be true. James's arms tightened around her. You're allowed to be complicated. To feel both generous and vindicated. To forgive while also remembering. That's not hypocrisy, that's being human. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the city sounds filtering through the windows, distant traffic. Neighbors talking, the hum of life continuing regardless of personal upheaval. Maya felt her exhaustion deepening, felt the weight of the day finally settling into her bones. I should let you sleep, James said quietly, stay. Maya's voice was drowsy but certain. Just stay. We'll figure out the interview questions and the story and everything else tomorrow. Tonight just, stay, okay. He shifted them both so they were lying down on the couch, Maya's back pressed against his chest, his arm around her waist. It should have felt too intimate, too fast. Instead it felt safe. Right, Maya drifted toward sleep thinking about tomorrow, the interviews, the questions, the exposure of her private life. But underneath the anxiety was something else. Something that felt like possibility. Like maybe revealing herself didn't mean losing herself. Like maybe being seen could coexist with staying true, and maybe, just maybe, the best revenge wasn't proving her family wrong. It was building a life so authentic, so meaningful, so full of genuine connection that their years of judgment became irrelevant. Not forgiven, perhaps, but transcended. She felt James's breathing even out behind her, felt his warmth, felt the solid reality of someone who saw all of her and stayed anyway. Tomorrow she would face the world. Tonight she would rest.